ultra running. As we seek the buckles, the finish lines, and the crazy distances, we experience a lot of failure along the way too. I'm Heidi.
And I'm Michelle, and we're both ultra runners and ultra running coaches who want to know more about the dreaded DNF, how, when, and why they happen, but more importantly, how we learn, we move forward, and we get back up to run again.
Hey everybody, welcome to Let's Run That Again. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Heidi Baker.
And I'm Michelle Goldberg.
And we're here to talk about the DNFs in ultra running and how we can deal with them, learn from them, and grow from them. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and leaving a review, liking, and comment is always so helpful and appreciated. It's the best way to support us. So this is our first episode of the podcast, and we're super excited to be here. So I figured since this is our first episode, we wanted to give a little bit of an introduction into ourselves. Both Michelle and I are ultra runners, and we are both ultra running coaches. So kind of just diving into a little background on ourselves, what got us into the sport of ultra running, and also what drove us to want to become coaches, since we're both coaches as well. What kind of drove us into learning more about the sport, like our fascination with the sport, and how that kind of all started for us. So, Michelle, I would like you to start and tell us kind of your ultra running journey. Like, just tell us about yourselves, because I don't even really know Michelle's full background on ultra running. So I'd love to hear it as well with you guys.
I know the way this connection came about was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really just happened so naturally and so awesome in a shared interest and
yes.
Perspective, I think, that we figured out. So yeah, I am an ultra runner. I started running in 2013. And it started, I got a group of women together and we did like a fun mud run obstacle course type thing. I was thinking about this today, actually. And I remember we wanted to do it just as something different, something fun. And I remember being at the start of this thing and first of all, being so nervous that I was like nauseous. And like we were, everybody lines up in the start corral and we were kind of like, we like hung back toward the back. And I had these like fleeting thoughts of like turning around and just running away. Like
how long was the race?
It was 5 miles and there were probably like 20 to 25 different obstacles, totally in the mud. And I just remember like feeling that like heart, like I was really excited and really, really wanted to do it. But at the same time, I was a little bit terrified. And then got out there and got in the mud and like the physicality of it and like the camaraderie of like hanging out with these other women and had a friggin' blast. Like just absolutely loved it. Loved pushing myself with something that was a bit challenging physically and mentally. And just had like so much fun. Fast forward a few months later, I was on a work trip and on a whim signed up for a 5K that I figured in my head, like, okay, well, they can't make me run, so I'll just walk if I don't feel like running. Like, what do I have to lose? So what? And ended up running this whole 5K nice and slow, but I ran and like having the experience of getting to the end and realizing like, oh my God, I didn't die. I don't feel like I'm gonna die. Like, and I think I actually enjoyed that. It helped that I was in Honolulu and it was like along the shore and it was beautiful. But still, I think it just changed my perspective on my ability to do this physical activity that I once thought I was never capable of. Like I never as a kid or when I was younger thought of myself as a runner. And from it just opened my eyes. And from there became something that I did like regularly. I got home from that work trip and got a fresh pair of running shoes and just started running like often, like every morning, early in the mornings. um I had little kids at the time. They were very little, and I think what I realize now is that became my time.
Yeah.
That became like something that I did only for me. I would go out early in the morning when they were sleeping, and you and I talked about this recently. It kind of became like the only time that nobody needed me.
Yeah.
And I'd go out in the dark and I could kind of pretend like the world, it's just, I didn't have to worry about anything else, and nobody was looking for me. Nobody was knocking on the door. And it just became a habit. It became something that I did regularly and then kind of blossomed. And I think I realized over several years that I was running enough and running consistently enough that, like, I might as well do a bigger race, or
Yeah.
like I might as well go do a bigger distance. I never had any interest in running a marathon. Um, but I knew of someone who was an ultra runner. So I had this sort of exposure
Yeah.
to ultra running, and I would say I was ultra curious for quite a while, kind of that
Yeah.
like, well, I wonder if I could. And then the Philly Marathon was coming up in 2019, and I literally figured, well, I'm going to go for a 20-mile run Saturday anyway. Why not
Right.
just run the marathon? So I did that, and then it kind of just blossomed. Um and I think it just became, I was disciplined enough in my running that I was kind of trained already, and it was kind of like, what else could I do?
Right.
Like, um and pretty much like everybody, then I just kept pushing the distance and wanting to go further.
Yeah.
um and that's what I'm still doing.
Yeah. How many hundreds have you done now?
Eight.
800s.
800s. I've done a 800s plus a couple other runs that were like over 90 miles, and a couple other like bigger, more than 100K distances.
Yeah.
um yeah.
Awesome.
I did my first 100 in September 2021, and I did that one, and then the next 2 years I've done like three a year. That's kind of where I'm tracking, is about three a year.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of had similar in the sense of like motherhood kind of pushing me towards running. I was never much of a runner, hated it actually. I did a little stint in the army and would run enough to do 2 miles for my PT test, and that was it. Like, and I would be dead and never want to run again after each one. So yeah, I hated running, and then I was big in going to the gym and like lifting. And then when I had my son, I did not want to bring him to child care centers at the gym. I didn't,
Yeah.
protective first child, but I was like, but I have this jogging stroller, and that's something I could do for fitness is I could put him in there and I could go run. So that kind of just started the whole journey for me. I went through the typical 5K, 10K, and then we moved to Germany, and I really fell in love with running when we were living in Europe. It was, well, first of all, races are a lot cheaper in Europe.
Yeah.
And also, I joined kind of a mom's like running club over there. It was like mostly military spouses, and we would just get together and run. And there were a lot of people who had gone farther distances, so I was inspired to sign up for my first half marathon. So I ran my first half marathon in Brussels, Belgium,
Oh,
pushing my
wow.
son in the stroller.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and then I did my first marathon in Liverpool, England, which was a lot of fun. That was my first marathon, and I've run, races in Spain. I've run races in Germany. I've run races in Italy. It was just a really cool. It became kind of my sightseeing opportunity. Like, go
Yeah.
run through the city. I see Madrid during this half marathon or whatnot. So, um, that was a lot of fun. And so after the marathon, I was pretty hooked. Mostly on road running. I didn't really. I mean, I ran on trails in Germany. We had a lot of great trails there. But
So beautiful.
I didn't really differentiate the difference between road running and trail running. Like I would run on the trails because it was easy to run on them. They all connected to all the villages for my long runs, but I didn't even know like the sport of ultra running or trail running was even like a thing. I just ran. So it was when I decided to I wanted to qualify for Marathon Maniacs, and you have to either do like 3 marathons in 3 months or 2 marathons in a 14-day period or something like that. So I decided to do the 2 marathons in a 14-day period, and one of the marathons that I was gonna do was the Cowtown in Texas because my parents lived in Texas, and so I was like, oh, I'll run the Cowtown Marathon, but they had a 50K, and I thought, well, it's only like 6 more miles. Yeah,
Yeah.
just give it a
Why
try.
not?
So I did that as one of my qualifying runs. So that was my first ultra marathon. And it was mostly road. So although I ran an ultra marathon, I didn't really consider myself like an ultra runner. I didn't even know ultra running was this whole big thing. Um, and then I ran the Marine Corps Marathon's inaugural 50K in 2019, and that was my next 50K. And then I kind of started like looking online, like what's the next distance I can go. I started seeing people who ran, something like a 50 miler and 100K, and so I was just a little bit curious, and I signed up for um, 100-mile race. It was, or not 100, I'm sorry, a 50-mile race. I was not nearly at 100 miles yet. Um, that's later this year. But I signed up for a 50-mile race, and the race I was signed up for was supposed to be a looped course, pretty flat for the most part. Um, and then my husband had to go away on like a TDY for the military. And so I had to drop out of that race. But I was so determined. I was like, I have done all this training. I want to run 50 miles. So I just Googled a 50 miler kind of near me and signed up for one. And I didn't really know about like checking for elevation gain and terrain and stuff like that. So my first 50-mile attempt was the Lookout Mountain 50 miler. It's in like Chattanooga area.
Oh, good. Nice. That's
I was
there.
not prepared at all. I was not prepared at all. I got lost on the course. It was like relentless elevation gain. It was very challenging. And I was, cut for time essentially.
Aw.
But even though I wasn't prepared, so that was my first official DNF, and I was okay with it because I kind of realized I wasn't trained for this, first of all. And second of all, like I kind of fell in love with just the environment there. Like
Yeah.
never had I been to a race where the volunteers at the aid station take your pack off and say, "What do you need? Like, let me fill this up for you." And like I had never had those kind of experiences. I had run road races where somebody throws a cup of water at you and hands you a gel, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just loved that. So I decided, well, then I got pregnant with my youngest. So I was kind of out of the ultra running for a bit because that last pregnancy was pretty rough. But I wanted to try 50-mile distance again. So in 22, would have been 22? Yeah. I'm like trying to remember what year we're in right now.
Oh, Lord.
In
Yeah.
2022, I signed up for the Georgia Jewel. Um, and that was my second 50-mile attempt. and that was also a very challenging course. And I was also cut for time in that attempt. So that was my second DNF. That was a harder one for me to accept. For some reason, that
Hmm.
was a totally different DNF experience. And I think it's because I knew I was ready and I knew I was prepared.
Yeah.
Um, and just like being cut for time just felt like like I could keep going kind of thing, but it's like being cut for time was just kind of a brutal blow for me. That was a hard one for me to accept. But I came back the next year, last year in 23, and got my 50-mile finish at the Georgia Jewel.
Yeah.
I was DFL. I was last place. But that, and I mean, just in the past like 2 years, I think I have kind of just dove into ultra running just completely. Like I've made it like it feels like my full identity. I've
Yeah.
become not only like an ultra runner myself, but an ultra running super fan. Like I love following all the
Yeah.
stories. I love
Yeah.
following all the races. I love watching live streams. I love the memes, the reels, the all just everything that's involved in it. And I've learned so much more about it. And I still consider myself a relatively new ultra runner. But I, I just fell in love with it. And it was after that um, first 50 or that second 50-mile attempt that I decided to get into coaching too. I wanted to take the UESCA ultra running course to learn more about it. I was
Yeah.
already an RRCA run coach and wanted to learn more about like ultra running too. So yeah, that was kind of my journey into it.
That's so awesome. It's interesting, like thinking about your experience at the Lookout Mountain one. It's almost like you gave yourself more grace
Yeah.
because you didn't have any expectations for yourself. You weren't hung up on that.
Yeah.
And
And I kind of went into it, and I don't know what it was because you'd think my first DNF would be the hardest one, but it really wasn't for me. Um, and I don't know if it was just because it was kind of my first exposure to the true ultra running. Like, yes, I'd run 50Ks, but and they absolutely count as ultra marathons, but a road race is very different than
it's
like a trail ultra running race.
for sure.
And so it might have just been that exposure kind of made me excited for the future more in it, like
Yeah.
to you know dive into it more, like okay, this is just the start kind of feeling. And then also just knowing that I hadn't put in the work for that specific course too,
Right. Right.
was kind of I think helped that mindset a little bit. But I guess
It's
since we're segueing into this, just if there's anybody listening who has no idea or you're just ultra curious and like want to know more about ultra running, DNF stands for did not finish. And just that's ultra running, encompasses everything from 50K to like 250 plus mile distances. It's like such a wide encompassing sport. There's so many different types of ultra races. Um, and so it's not a one size fits all. Everybody kind of finds their niche within the niche of ultra running that they enjoy. But the the whole reason to this like podcast was to kind of explore that DNF or the really, really hard days or races that don't go according to plan. I have become very familiar with DNFs in my short time as an ultra runner. And my recent one at Kettle Moraine 100K a couple months ago was kind of what sparked this desire in me to kind of explore it a little bit more. And then the irony in all this is I listened to Michelle actually interview a couple other podcasters, the ultra running guys, Jeff and Jeremy. They have a great podcast, but they were exploring they brought Michelle on to interview them as kind of a change of pace. And they were talking about recent DNFs that they both had. And as I was listening to them, it sparked, just this idea in my brain that so often we're hearing the glory stories, like the great
Yeah.
finishes, things that, we overcome, like, we did it, we made it, and like those good days. And it can make ultra running look really glamorous sometimes. And I have had very unglamorous experiences in ultra running. I know a lot of people have too. So I kind of I was like, maybe I should start a podcast about this and explore it and talk to people who've experienced it. And that was when I like posted on Instagram looking for stories of DNFs. And it was Michelle who actually reached out and said like, oh, like I'm really curious as to like what you're working on. And that's kind of how this all came to be, us
Yeah,
working together on
you
this.
you put some like mysterious lead out there, like I'm working on a
Yeah.
project. Who has? And I was like, I wonder, like, what you got going on? When you told me, I was like, oh my god, like that I have had thoughts, the same type of thoughts and the same type of interest, because I think in this ultra running space, there's so many podcasts out there.
Yeah.
Like
There's a lot.
they're almost like podcast saturation, covering all aspects of ultra running. But I think there's a hole in the space where people tend to shy away from talking about the harder things. And like you said, like you look at social media and sometimes it just makes it all look so fantastic, and look at my accomplishments, look at my medal, look at what I did. Um, and I think I when you and I started talking, like I know we share the interest, is really just to normalize the struggle.
Yeah.
Like I have people say to me often, like, oh, gosh, that you, not that I don't want to say like you make this look easy, but they're like, oh, you must love it so much, and you go out and you run all the time. And I think what a lot of folks don't realize is that it really is hard.
Yeah.
Like running is hard.
Or when they say
But
things like, oh, a 50K must be easy for you now or something, like it's like, no, nothing about it is easy.
It really, that like gets under my skin, because I'm like, no, like it's friggin' hard. I just choose to do it anyway. And I think, we look at people like the David Goggins and all the elite ultra runners and all these elite athletes, and we think like, oh, they're built for that. Like it must come so easy for them. And they're just designed for it, and it comes so naturally for them. But I think what we don't realize is that no, they're not. Nobody is. Everybody's human.
Yeah.
It's just that some people make the choice to pursue an activity even when it is hard. Some people are more willing to accept that, sometimes you struggle a bit, and sometimes your success is not guaranteed. And I think there's a misconception about why people, from non-runners, there's a misconception
Yeah.
about people who run a lot. But I think also like in our society and our culture, like there's a tendency to shy away from things that are hard. And all the like, this should come easy for me, that I should be able to do this without any problem, when really maybe it's more like, I'm going to take a chance, and we need more openness and willingness to do hard things where the outcome is uncertain.
Yeah. I mean,
and
that
I love that uncertain space.
Yeah.
Where you don't really know what's going to happen.
Exactly. Like, I mean, I've had several DNF experiences now, and I mean, each one varies, like in the way I handle it, the way I feel about it. I mean, I've already touched on the fact that my first DNF, I was kind of like, okay, like learn from that.
Yeah.
My second one was like really devastating blow to me. I took it really hard. And I mean, I had a 50K at the beginning of this year that I proudly DNF'd. Like, I had no more, it was a looped course, and I had zero interest in going back out on a second loop. I was doing a night 50K. It's called the Hellhole 100. Actually,
Oh,
yeah, so it was the frozen Hellhole 100 though. They have one in the summertime that's Hellhole 100, and the one
okay.
in January is frozen, but we're gonna have Kayla on at some point, and she is actually the race director for those. But
That's
so
fabulous.
I went out, and it was like at least knee deep water, like for miles. Like, and I did the night one. I did the night 50K because I wanted some nighttime trail experience to
Yeah.
get ready for, my upcoming races. I had a 100K on the docket. I have a 100 miler later this year. And so I wanted just that night experience, but it was cold. I was trudging through water for miles. There were three of us night 50K runners. I mean, there were people doing 100-mile and stuff out there, but I was just trudging through darkness by myself, in the dark woods and with water going past my knees. And and so I got and she was like, "Oh, what do you need before you go on the next loop?" I'm like, "I'm not going out on another loop." I was like, "I came for nighttime trail experience. I got it. I'm good." Like, I want to warm up and dry off and sleep now. So, and that was just like, I was totally okay with it, had no issues, wanted to DNF actually. Um,
Yeah.
and like just
You got what you needed out of it.
exactly. And then, it's like then my 100K DNF a couple months ago, that was a lot harder for me to accept. And I think I've learned to kind of grow and accept them in different ways, but it's just so different each time. And I'm somebody who my 50 miler last year that I finished, I argued with the race director to let me continue at an aid station where I came past 8 minutes. And I so I was determined to finish that one. There was no excuse in my brain, like even if I
Yeah,
came
you
in
fought
past
for it.
if I passed the cutoff. So, it's like looking at myself kind of sparked this curiosity too of like, why did I do that then? But during this 100K, I did not have that same empowerment and that same drive to say, I don't care if I come in past the finish. I don't care how late it is. I don't care, what time it is when I finish. I'm going to finish it. Like,
Mhm.
where's that? How is that different? Um, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean,
Yeah.
I I had reasons to DNF this race, in the Kettle Moraine, the 100K. Um, but I had reasons to DNF in last year when I was running the 50 miler too. And so it's like we preach this, you know, this finish is the most important thing. Um, and so trying to find, how each day is different, each race is different, each person's different, and like just talking about those experiences and why they're so different is just fascinating to me because it's like, I
Absolutely.
mean, even
We
into my own,
so
looking into my own self and my own psychology of like those differences, I don't have the
yeah,
answers. And so I just
right.
find it fascinating.
I think the thing for me that has been so powerful about this sport is how much of a learning opportunity it constantly is. Like I am someone who always loves learning, and I feel like I hope that I never, and I don't think I ever will feel like, um, I've grown or I've gotten to some kind of wise place,
Right.
because I feel like we are all constantly evolving and we're all constantly growing. And this sport, and for me, just being willing to do hard things in general has been such an incredible growth opportunity.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think, when you are willing to embrace the challenges and to be willing to explore like what's under the surface and those different mindsets, those different aspects, like you were talking about, like what was different at that first 50 miler versus the more recent 100K at Kettle, like all the different factors, and it can be really deep and philosophical, or it can be weather. It could be that you ate something funky the night before.
Logistical. It could be
It could be
logistical. That was
logistics.
kind
It
of
could
mine at
be
Kettle
anything.
Moraine. It's like, do I really want to go maybe get a like finish this and then maybe get a couple hours of sleep before we have to check out and then I have to get on a flight the next morning and go home to my kid? Like it was just like logistical of like, do I want to
Yeah.
keep everybody else up waiting for me until 4 o'clock in the morning, or do I want to just say I had a day out here and go to sleep? You know, it's kind of like, and those things play in, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's, I feel like in people who aren't involved in the ultra running could look at somebody like me and think, why wouldn't you just focus on like shorter distances or something and get better there first? Like, or DNF 100K. Why would you still try to chase after 100 mile later this year? Like, why wouldn't you
Yeah.
like,
So what did you do then? You signed up for 100 mile. I love
yeah.
that.
No, I signed up for a second 100 miler after the 100 miler I'm already signed up for. Like, yeah.
Fab.
Yep. Like that night. It's like
Yep.
never DNF and then ultra sign up because you'll make poor decisions. But it's yeah, it's like, why do we come back to it then? Like why do we not drop down in distance and try to improve ourselves at a certain distance? And I think that kind of goes deeper into what ultra running is. It's not even, yeah, the elites, it's about performance, but I feel like for a lot of us it's not even about performance.
Right.
It's not the performance like I want to do well at this distance. It's I want to just explore this distance. Like,
Yes. Like that
yeah.
curiosity. When you approach this sport, or when you can approach doing hard things with an absolute openness and sense of curiosity, there's just endless opportunity for growth. And um, it can be so incredibly powerful when you're just willing to be sort of open and accept that, like, yeah, it's going to be friggin' hard, and you might suffer, you might not, you might be in pain. And I feel like sometimes the notion of suffering is really just a mindset. um but you might be in pain and you might have a really tough time, but if you can be open within that space, and and consider, like, that you can't control it.
Yeah.
You can't force the variables. I think, like, a lot of us humans just really naturally have a tendency to want to control
Yeah.
things, get really, really uncomfortable with uncertainty, right? So a lot of people are not okay with being in that gray zone of not really knowing an outcome or not really knowing what's going to happen. But if you can just open your mind and settle into sort of a gray space, and be okay with that, oh my God, the world is your oyster. You can do anything. And within all of that, you can still identify, like, okay, there are some small things that I can
Yeah.
control. Like, what can I control? I can train. I can learn nutrition. I can take care of my body. I can pack extra snacks for my run. I can make sure that I have a warm sweatshirt for afterwards, or that I bring a rain gear. Like, it's kind of like, learn to control what you can and be willing to just be open to how all the other factors play out. That's really hard to do,
Yeah.
especially when you're in the throes of it and when you're in the moment. But
And I think I had touched on this with you before, but I have focused so much on kind of trying to paint a positive picture for myself in a race. Like when I get to that dark place, when I'm in a lot of pain. And so I try to just almost avoid it, like think, well, mind over matter. Like you can just, you can do this, like suck it up kind of thing. But instead kind of feel like I need to embrace that discomfort and like learn how to just be in that discomfort and be like, okay, we're here
Yeah.
now. Now we work kind of thing. And it's funny because I just read, I don't know if you've read it, The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. And
I love it, but yeah,
I was like, did he write this book for ultra runners? As I was reading,
yeah,
he didn't, because he's speaking to just the general like population and how we avoid discomfort at all costs. And
yeah. The audiobook.
that just like reading that just kind of like made me go, it's okay to feel the discomfort. You don't have to avoid it or tell yourself you're not feeling it. You can just feel it. You can
Right.
just be there with it. And that's kind of what I think gets people who are really successful in ultra running through, is just being there in that discomfort and being in that pain. Um,
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was getting at when I mentioned suffering. Like, I feel like you suffer when you are not willing to accept that you are in pain. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, if your quads are burning and you're tired and you're feeling faded and all of those things, if you try to fight that, if you try to control it and push it away and pretend you're not in that space, like, that's when you start to
Yeah,
suffer.
and that's kind of what he addresses even in that book, is like you
Yeah.
can be happy in discomfort. You can find happiness in discomfort. And in
Yeah.
fact, most of the time if you're unhappy, you're avoiding discomfort. Like
Right.
and
That's where that sort of disconnect happens.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, and even like learning to be in that space, and there's like that fine tune of, okay, I'm in pain, I'm leaning into it because I can't change this, I need to be here and do the work. And but there are like tiny little things that maybe you can do to improve the experience. Like, one of the greatest tips I've heard for doing for running ultras is, when you really, really start hitting a wall and when you really fall into that pain cave, especially if you have thoughts about like, oh, I don't know if I can continue, it's kind of to ask yourself, have I done all that I can? Is there something else that I can do right now?
yeah.
And usually for me, it's, oh, I can eat something.
Yeah.
It's so friggin' simple, but it's like, I could put food in my mouth right now.
Yeah.
And just that one little thing that you physically do can totally change everything,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely.
And or one thing that I tell myself often is like, lower my shoulders.
Mm.
Like, I
Mhm.
find, like, when you're really,
Mhm.
really, you're struggling and you're struggling, and it's like, well, can you lower your shoulders right now? And just something so simple can just change the
I
trajectory.
always download comedy to listen to.
Yeah.
And so when I get in a really dark space, I like listen to just comedy and like just laugh, because it totally takes me outside of myself and what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's just like, even if you're in a ton of pain, if somebody's really funny, you're gonna laugh. And so, like, to just be, and then it just becomes comical because I'm like alone in the woods on a dark trail, like laughing hysterically. And I just think about, if anybody saw me right now, they'd think I'm insane. And like, that's funny in itself. And so, yeah, it's just, that's kind of my go to for a really dark space. It's like, let's just laugh for a bit. Like, let's just laugh
Yeah.
at stuff. Um, and that kind of, helps me through. I mean, I know there will be like, and we have talked about this a little bit before, but like people will say in ultra running, like, you need to find your why. And like when you're in that
Mhm.
dark space, that's what you need to, you know, dig up and find and like help motivate you to keep going. But I kind of struggle with that personally. Like I don't think I have one why and why I do ultra running. Um,
And I feel like it's almost like, that's kind of daunting in a lot of ways. And I feel like I struggle with that when people say, oh, what's your why? And I'm like, I don't, I mean, yes, I can get deep and existential and philosophical and go to this big space, but sometimes it's like too there are too many different things, and it's really hard. And so I feel like when someone is faced with that question, like, that is not particularly helpful to me either.
Yeah.
um, because like you said, it can change, or it's then I feel like, well, if I don't have a quick response to that, like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. And people will say it too. Like you'll see people say on Instagram and social media, like, if you don't have a why, you're not gonna finish. Like, and so
Right.
that's a lot of pressure. It's like if I don't have this
That's a lot of
specific
pressure.
like little mantra that gets me through, I'm not gonna be able to finish this race. Like honestly, I've never really had a specific why. Like it can change race by race and like
Right.
and I feel like I'm in this like and this is not to insult anybody at all, but like I'm in the very much engrossed in like the mommy fitness like part of like that space on like Instagram and stuff. And I it's because I mean I call myself Strong Mama Miles. I am a mother and like I so I'm kind of just involved in that and but a lot of times it's like your why is your kids and showing them anything is possible and like and I feel bad saying it because that's just kind of the norm that I see all the time, but my kids don't really have anything to do with why I do ultras. Like, and I generally don't want my kids around when I'm running an ultra. Like at the end
Right.
of my race, like, and I love my kids dearly. I'm with them all the
Of
time, but
course.
I
Of course.
personally just don't. It's a very separate thing for me, and it's kind
Yeah.
of just mine, and that's my little bubble and my little space, and I'm totally okay with that. But I feel like you can almost feel this pressure to make it like your why or your family experience and like showing them that anything's possible. Like I don't hide it from them. Like if they want to grow up and run ultras someday, that's awesome, but I don't really talk about it with them. They know I go run and they know when I disappear for a weekend I'm doing a race or something, but
Right.
I don't push it on them. I don't come home and go, "Well, mommy ran 50 miles." Like it's just kind of separate from my life with them and I think
Yeah.
that's okay and you don't have to feel guilty about that.
Absolutely. I can totally relate to that. And yeah, I think so too. And you wonder, sometimes there is such pressure to portray the right answer on
Right.
social media and to like portray it a certain way. And doesn't that sound so lovely? But you know what? Like, it all comes down to you, we all have to just be true to
Yeah.
ourselves, and you got to for you. And the airplane analogy just popped into my head that I used to use a lot, like with doing therapy with clients and talking about, when you're on an airplane and the cabin loses pressure and the oxygen mask drops down, you have to put it on yourself first, because if you pass out, you can't take care of anyone else. So in some ways I see that analogy in
Yeah.
what you're saying too, that this has to be about Heidi doing what Heidi needs. And this is something you do to be true to yourself and take care of you.
And I
And then you can
yeah.
provide for your family and have energy for everything
And I feel
else.
like it's just kind of that way like, especially, you know, there's the moms that want to share the whole experience with their family and their kids. And then there's the other flip side to the coin that I don't think is talked about, but sometimes you just want something that's just yours. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I have to share my food with my kids. I share my home. I feel like everything is shared. Nothing is just mine. And even when I come home, they take my medals and stuff, and wear them around the house. And that's fine. Like, take it all you want. My experience out there is mine and mine alone like that.
Yep.
And so I mean I feel like that's kind of even when I DNF a race, it's like I still have my ultimate prize is that experience I had and
Absolutely.
not like something that I get at the end of it or the t-shirt or whatnot. It's that experience I had. And I think that's kind of why I keep going back to it because I'm packing up all these like memories and these experiences as
Yep.
like my little prize box essentially. Like that's my reward.
Oh, absolutely. I completely understand and agree with that. And I think like there's something so powerful and so beautiful about allowing yourself to be really vulnerable and put yourself and like go out there on a trail or on a course or even just on a Saturday run, just allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to risk having a hard time
Yeah.
or to risk possibly failing, like to not know the outcome and to go do it anyway and sort of put in the work and do, do everything you can. Like it's it's just the most beautiful thing. Like honestly, like sometimes I feel like sometimes I can talk really eloquently about it and sometimes it's just like this intense
Yeah.
feeling so hard to describe.
And you just see versions of yourself that you don't see anywhere else, I think, too.
Yeah.
Like, I think, anyone who's known me my whole life, is surprised at me going out and doing these things because this was never I was never athletic. I was never really outdoorsy or anything like that. So like I explore this part of myself that's just a totally different version of myself that I don't have access to in any other way or anywhere else. Like
Yeah.
the me that is out there, you know, covered in mud and like crying because it's 1 a.m. and I'm alone on a trail, like is like a me that I don't get to normally see or haven't really experienced. So I seek those experiences. Like I say I'm I very much do love like the comfort of indoors, air conditioning, all that stuff, but it's like then to go and just be outside and in the woods and in the mud and like doing those hard things is just I don't know. It's why I keep going back to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just it's incredibly powerful. Um and it is hard to describe. I mean, the incredible sense of self-satisfaction and like that self-reliance. I think, so much of it is knowing that no matter what, like we can handle it.
Yeah.
No matter what, it it will work out. It is going to be okay. And I think sometimes people are reluctant to embark on doing something really hard because they feel like, well, what if I fail? What if I fall down? Like what if I don't make it to the finish? What if I'm too slow? And I think that's our innate our little inner self trying to control so much and wanting to, like I don't want to do this unless I'm certain it's going to go okay.
Yeah.
Like I
And
think people.
you've had like I even if you DNF, you've still had all those experience that however many
Yeah.
miles, that however much time of that experience.
Yep.
And like I think you said this when we were talking at one point, like you finish or you learn, like you get something
Yeah.
out of it, even when it's the worst day and you're torn to shreds, like you still learn something. You learn something about yourself, you learn something about your abilities, you learn what you can do differently, like you learn something.
Yeah. And like even if you succeed, if you're not learning, then you're not doing it right
Right.
because there are always things you can take
Yep.
away. And always things that can inform you for the next time you're in a similar situation. Um, but just choosing to believe that I can handle this. I really can cope with absolutely anything that comes my way. I think is remarkably powerful.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get to that place, and I think sometimes people, where folks might struggle is that thought process. Like, I can't cope. I'm not going to be able to handle it if X or Y or Z.
I think Courtney Dauwalter said that before was it before Hard Rock? I think she said like decide to try. Just decide
Yes.
to try. Like that's the only decision you have to make is to just get out there and try. And I think
And decide.
that's kind of like what my ultimate goal with this podcast is to um have people learn that the failure isn't really that scary, and hear stories of people, even like the more experienced, faster podium chaser type ultra runners, everybody from the back, middle, and front of the pack, who have failed at some point and and kept trying, like, and that it's okay and you're going to learn something, and don't be scared of trying, because we've all been there. And when you decide to DNF at an ultra, you're going to get nothing but support. Like, and
Yeah.
like, I remember saying during a DNF that I had, at like a more local ultra marathon, I'd fallen and it was kind of, my calf was like seized up and it was kind of messing with my gait. And I had the Georgia Jewel coming up, and so I didn't really want to mess anything up or injure myself. So I just decided to DNF. And I was okay with it, but I came around to the main aid station because it was a loop, and they started cheering for me, and I was like, oh no, don't cheer for me, I'm DNFing. And they started cheering louder, and they were like, yay, we love DNFs, like, good job, you gave it your all, like. And so it's like, don't ever be scared of this community, and in trying and failing and trying again or anything, like, because nobody cares. Like, everybody is just
Yeah.
genuinely supportive and just wants to see you out there, like, to see you out
Oh
there
my God.
trying.
100%. And I think we, especially in this bizarre world of social media, um, we, in our heads, we think like, oh my God, what's everybody going to think of me? Like, I'm a total failure. I put it out there. I was going to do this race and now I'm not going to make it. And what am I going to post? Like, what am I, and the reality is that we are experiencing all those thoughts, and we're experiencing all the work that we put into this, and we are experiencing it from this really limited perspective. But if you step back and you look at it like, well, if my friend, if Bobby DNF'd, how would I feel about his effort, and what would I say to him, and why can't I apply that
Yeah,
same thought,
exactly.
same sentiment to myself? Like, I talked to Jeff and Jeremy, the ultra running guys, when I spoke with them, and I say this a lot. I call it the reverse golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to learn to be as kind to ourselves as we are to other people.
Yeah.
Because we are all our own worst critics.
Absolutely.
And people are so damn hard on themselves sometimes. And I think that can really trip us up and can really become so self-limiting.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're willing to just try, and you're willing to just like see what happens, and just be willing to sort of put yourself in a position where you decide you've really got nothing to lose. Like, what's the big deal? You don't make it, you don't finish. Okay, well, you're going to learn from that anyway.
Yeah.
And the reality is that everyone else is actually going to give you nothing but love and support for putting in the effort.
Absolutely.
And for just taking a chance on yourself.
Yeah, after my last DNF post, like, I put together a whole post about it, and someone, an ultra runner who I really respect and look up to, commented on that post and said, "You're one of the ultra runners I admire the most." And she's like, "DNF is better than DNS, did not start, like, any day." And I was like, wait a minute, no, you're one of the ultra runners I look up to the most. Like, and so it's just like, you don't see yourself in the same eyes that others see you. Like,
Right.
you're going to get nothing but overwhelming support, and people respect you getting out and trying and, attempting something so hard and daunting.
Right. And I think that is really the overarching goal of this podcast, is to just get that message out there more, and to really, I am so excited to bring people in and talk with folks about their thought processes and their experiences around all these topics. Because if we can just a little bit normalize the struggle,
Yeah.
and the fact that, like, you really don't have anything to lose when you take a chance on yourself.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, one of my favorite poems is like, what if you actually fly?
Yeah.
Like, when you fall, spread your wings, because you might surprise yourself. Like, everybody is stronger than they think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm super excited to sort of deep dive. I feel like you and I could just
I
talk for
know. I'm
hours.
like we should probably wrap it up so that we still have things to talk about. But we are going to be bringing on, like, we've already got a lineup of some great stories and people, and I'm just so excited to talk to them. So yeah, I think that's probably a good kind of ending point for today.
Yeah.
And our goal is to have these out every 2 weeks to start. So you can look forward to another episode in 2 weeks, and we will have a guest on, and we'll be talking to her about her DNF experience, and we're really looking forward to these conversations we have upcoming. So,
Yes, and we welcome ideas. Absolutely.
yes.
Like, I feel like my head's going a million miles a minute. I'm like, oh, but also this tip and that tip
Yep.
and this thing I talk about and that thing. But we welcome ideas. If you want, like, I don't know, whatever our listeners want to hear, what they want to see. But also, if you're interested in coming on the show
Yeah.
and talking with us, or someone who maybe we should reach out to us on Instagram, leave a comment. Like,
Yeah, we have an Instagram. It's at Let's Run That Again. And on there you can find a link to offer, like, your own interview. If you have a story you want to tell, it does not have to be a specific DNF story. We're not just like, although we are like calling ourselves like a DNF like podcast, we are not specifically only interested in DNFs. We're just looking for those struggles and those hard days and how we've like overcome them and learned from them. So even if you don't have a DNF story to tell, we still want you on, and we still want to talk about your experiences. So yeah, you can click that link and either suggest somebody you know or offer your own. So
yeah, because even when you make it to the finish, it might not have gone the way you planned.
Yep.
And there's still so much of a growth opportunity in that.
Yeah.
When things go the way you expected them to.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that wraps up today. Thank you guys so much for listening. We really can only do this with the support from you guys and the community. So, yeah, please keep listening, keep up to date on our Instagram, and we will see you in a couple weeks with our first official guest.
Yay!
All right.
All right. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.
Yes. We appreciate your support so much. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tag us on our Instagram at Let's Run That Again and give us a shout out when you listen. And as always, we welcome feedback from you and are open to ideas and guests for future episodes. Reach out on our Instagram or email us at letsrunthatagainpod@gmail.com.